One.
Welcome. I'm Bill Johnson, interim pastor of Yadkinville First Baptist. My young friends who are bringing you this service have kindly offered me a portion of the program. I'm a storyteller, about 5 minutes, though today I might need a couple of minutes extra for explanation, since I'm calling this Tales from the Dark Side. So named because over the years I have expressed concern, criticism, even ridicule of all things online and internet, calling it the disinformation highway and the misinformation thoroughfare. But the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our world, so here I am on the dark side. Further rationalization. I liken this to perhaps the early years of the Christian movement. The Romans executed Jesus. Tradition has it they also got Paul and Peter. There were hounding by the government, occasional local and sporadic persecutions, even a couple of empire-wide, emperor-led attempts to exterminate Christianity. So if Christians weren't terrified of the Romans, they were at least wary of them. So at the same time, the Christians used the unholy trinity of the Roman Empire, one being a state-of-the-art system of roads, a second being a common universal language, Greek at first, giving way to Latin later, and finally the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, during which there were extended decades where there was freedom from warfare and people were mobile. So the early Christians used this to spread the gospel and prepare itself as an institution to be ready to receive favor when the government got it and power when it came later. Another dark side to which we perhaps will return. But for now, we proceed with the story warily, understanding that while we are offering this message in Jesus' name, there are other people using this same medium for the exploitation of children, or to steal your money or your identity, or both, or to create malicious untruths about you, or to move middle and high school students to the brink and sometimes over to suicide. So I proceed warily. Nonetheless, I promised a story. Perhaps it shall be like Dorothy Allison, the writer, once said, that this fiction shall be a harder piece of truth. Jonas Winslow. Jonas lived in a run-down shack at the edge of a swamp in the backwoods of North Louisiana around the middle of the 20th century. Lived there without benefit of electricity or plumbing. He ate pretty much what he could catch or trap or shoot or gather: nuts, berries, mushrooms from the swamp, the little tender leaves of the poke branch, but not the berries. He lived off the land, and that was good for him. He didn't like people, and people didn't like him. He was known in the area to be a vile person, irreverent, wicked, and infidel. Not exactly the kind of place you would think to put a young girl in need of respite and hope. But one day, there she stood, right outside his shack, just looking at him. He yelled, "Get away from here! Go on! Run off!" She didn't move. He strung up about a long line of cuss words. If I were to say them here, it'd be 25 seconds at least of bleep, bleep, bleep. She didn't move. She didn't flinch when he flung an empty walnut hull that rolled around her feet, upon which she had maybe enough leather to make one shoe, not just a pair. But it went well with her ragged and dirty dress and her wispy hair and her dirty demeanor. She was a pitiful waif of a child, but she wouldn't move. Jonas was struck. Nobody stayed around him, so he yelled at her again to go on, and she never moved. He had in his hand a piece of hoe cake he had been eating with some honey. He thought he noticed her drooling, salivating, so he said, "You hungry?" She nodded, and when she reached for the bread, He saw the rope burns on her wrist, and he knew what that was. He'd been tied up too. He wondered if she had welts and scars on her back like his. And something deep within Jonas welled up. An old friend, rage, but a new emotion, tenderness, which is about as common to Jonas as a coconut tree in Minnesota. He was transfixed. She ate most of his whole cake and all of his honey. She sat down on the stump and looked at him. If he got up and moved, she followed him. If he sat down, she sat down. Finally, they ate again, and then night fell. He threw her a blanket. She curled up and went fast asleep by the wood stove. But Jonas was troubled. He knew they'd be coming. They always came. Anytime anything bad happened in the community, they always came to Jonas. A cat could go missing in the neighborhood and somebody would yell out to the sheriff, "Jonas Winslow's stealing cats again. He's probably offering them up to Satan in a sacrifice and then eating them, claws and all." He was a vile infidel of a man in his community. But she just slept peacefully. Sure enough, about the 5th day, Jonas heard a voice. "Jonas Winslow, it's the sheriff. Don't give me no trouble now, Jonas. I'm coming in." Sure enough, the sheriff appeared along with 2 burly deputies. I mean, you better have reinforcements if you come after Jonas Winslow. The little girl moved behind Jonas and put him between her and the law. And the sheriff said, "Jonas, I'm not accusing you of anything, but this girl has got to go with us." And she squalled out, "No!" Jonas jumped out of the brogans. He didn't know she could make a sound. And the sheriff said, "Jonas, she's got to go with us." "No!" she said, and grabbed hold of Jonas' leg and wrapped her arms around and knotted her knuckles so she wasn't budging. And the sheriff got down on one knee to the little girl and said, "Honey, you've got to come with us. Your mom and daddy are looking for you." "No!" And Jonas Winslow reached down a big old dirty hand to her and said, "I'll go with you." And she took his hand, and they walked out of the swamp. The sheriff, 2 deputies, Jonas Winslow, and a little wisp of a girl. They got to the car, and the sheriff said, "Now, honey, you got to go with us." "No!" again. And Jonas said, to the dismay and surprise to the sheriff, Jonas said, "I'll go with you." And it was as if the whole swamp shuddered. A tale from the dark side. Thank you.